Welcome to the Strategic Thinkers Podcast, where we navigate the real path to business success, your path. Each episode brings you actionable strategies and real stories from entrepreneurs who are building their business their way. My name is Sean Atkinson, and I'm your guide through the process of making the inconvenient convenient. Because when you can make the inconvenient convenient, people are willing to pay you for it. The more convenient you can make it, the better the experience. And that's where you make real progress. Welcome to the Strategic Thinkers Podcast. Episode 1. I thought it would be a good idea for me to start with an origin story because as we go forward, I'll be sharing a lot of insights, frameworks, tips, all these different things for you to be able to follow, to be able to grow and evolve your business, but they all require a certain level of trust. And in order to be able to get you to trust me, the best way to be able to do that is to give you an idea of how I came about this information and why I'm so confident in my ability to be able to not just share it with you, but share things that you can actually do something with. So my origin story actually starts in a somewhat unconventional place. When I was about 7 years old, my mother started working for Atlantic Records and Atco Records, which is now Elektra Records. And one of the first things that people would always say is, oh, wow, record industry. You must have met a lot of stars and you must have got a lot of free music. We can dash those hopes right now. One of the first things she said before I even let you in the building, no running up to stars and no asking people if they can give you free records. Now, this was towards the end of the 70s, going into the 80s. So it was a little bit different then. Record labels were more of a monopoly. You didn't necessarily have independent artists and things the way that you do now. So if you were trying to be an artist, you had to go through the record labels. It was very rare that you would get someone that was independent. It's not like the distribution deals and things that you have now. The reason that this was so important and pivotal is it wasn't just knowing the record label and the business. It was understanding the difference between the music business and the business of music. So the reason I said that a lot of people would say, oh, well, you must get a lot of free music and get to meet a lot of stars. That's the music business. That's the shiny part, the results at the end. The business of music is everything it takes to lead up to that point. And that's what you do when you're in that building. I would dare to say the most important people aren't necessarily the artists in the building. It's the kingmakers. It's the people that understand the process well enough to be able to say, I can take just about anyone off the street and turn them into a superstar. It's knowing how to be able to pull in different people for different parts of the process to be able to make sure that it's efficient and it's something that not only works, but it's repeatable. So when my mother started working for Atlantic Records, she worked in the data processing team. And one of the things that stood out to me was we got an opportunity to really see all the different departments. And I say we because eventually I ended up working there myself and being an intern and then going in and working full time. But as a child, you know, one of the things that she used to always say is, well, come into the city and after I finish work, we'll go do this. After I finish work, we'll go do that. We'll go see the lighting of the Christmas tree at Rockefeller Center. We can go ice skating at Rockefeller Center. We can go to a Radio City Music Hall and catch a show. We can go out to dinner. We can do all of these different things, but it always came at the end of, I got to finish work. So I would get to a job as a little kid. You only have so much attention span. And I would get there and I'd want to rush, but my mother would say, I have to finish running this marketing report. I have to finish running this sales report. So I started to catch on to, well, you're running a marketing report. What are you running? Well, you're running a sales report. What are you running? And she would give me her definition of what it was they were running and why. And those were basically the answers to questions, say like 1 through 5. But as I started to learn more about what she was doing, then I became more interested and I wanted to get answers to questions 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So I got to a point where when they ran the reports, my mother would say, stop asking me about that. If you want to be able to get the answers to the questions that you have, go ask them. So when they would deliver the reports, I would go around as a kid and being the old soul that I was, I would ask them questions. I see you ran this report. What were you looking for? My mother said that you run it for this reason, but I noticed that you've been running it for this artist and I'm seeing this and I'm seeing that, and I don't see the connection. When you're like 7, 8, 9, 10, these are questions that are beyond your years. But when you ask smart questions, no matter what your age is, people that are in the know will actually stop and take the time to be able to answer you in most cases because they see that you get it and no one wants to snuff out that kind of flame. So I was very fortunate to be able to get access to executives and people that were very seasoned in the business so that I could learn the ins and outs of the process. And one of the reasons why I bring this up is because that's where I got my introduction to the process. That's where I got my introduction to collaboration and the importance of not only understanding what the brand does, because technically the record label was the brand, but then it was also understanding the audience. And that's what they were pulling from the reports. They wanted to be able to understand the audience. They wanted to understand, did this lever that we pulled do what we thought it was going to do? Let's talk about it from a marketing standpoint. The marketing team had to be able to deliver so that the sales team could see the numbers that they needed to hit. And the sales team needed to hit those numbers to be able to prove the A&R rep right. The A&R rep was the one that when you proved them right, it gave them more leeway to be able to go out and find more artists. So it's a very cyclical process. And once you start to learn the process, you start to realize there are different departments that serve different purposes. And the reason that I love the process is because if you can find out where your talents and skills are and you can understand the process, then you can navigate it intentionally and find the place that you bring the most value and then monetize it. So the difference between the music business and the business of music, the perception versus the reality is there are so many people that would hear the music business and say, again, oh, you must get to meet a lot of stars, go to a lot of parties. It must have been great to get all the free music. What's really going on is you get to understand the business side of music. You get to understand how to be able to take a business idea and turn it into something that not only you get to benefit from financially, but you can turn it into something that it gets people careers. And that was something that I always found fascinating. And that's what led to me technically starting my own business. As I got older, like I said, I became an intern and I went from asking the questions about why they were running reports to being able to actually give feedback on, so you're having this problem? Did you try running this report? Well, why would I run that report? Well, I noticed that you said this was happening with this artist. If you run this report, it can give you these key parameters so that you can understand what you're looking at. And if you understand what you're looking at, then it gives you a better idea of what you're supposed to be putting out there for the audience. So if you're trying to get more record sales, but for some reason you're not making the connection or your artist isn't making that connection with them, you need to find out what they don't like about the songs on that actual album. Like in some cases, when someone released an album, it would be, oh, I don't know why they released that song first. These songs were better than that song they initially put out. Now, the record label had their own reasons for putting out that first song, but think about how many albums, or at least back in those days, where the B-sides were just as good as some of the songs on the A-side. Who decided what the A-side and the B-side was? Those are things that I started looking at, and I got an early start to being able to ask the questions and get those kind of answers. And when you can talk to the marketing team, and you can talk to the sales team, and you can talk to A&R, then you get to find out all the different reasons why everyone decided that they wanted to make that choice and then how it all pieced together. So in some cases, you would say, okay, I have an audience and I need to find an artist for that audience. There are people clamoring for this kind of music. Like this artist passed away or this artist changed their style. So they're not putting that kind of music out there anymore. So now there's a void. So they need to find an artist to fill that void. Or you can have an artist that's really talented and they're coming out with a sound that isn't really out there. So then you're being an innovator and you're taking an artist, you're taking a business idea and you're saying, how do I get it out to an audience and get it to take off to the point where not only are people willing to pay, but pay enough to be able to make it worthwhile. So it was really an opportunity to not only learn about the process and the business, but it was an opportunity to be able to understand how you put the pieces together. So as I got older and I got up into my teens, I ended up moving out to California. And one of the things that I wanted to be able to do was you can't get around in California without a car. Now they have trains and things like that, so it's a little bit different. But initially, it was something where you need to have a car. And the moment I stopped playing basketball and I said, you know, being 6'8", 6'9", that's not the only thing that I can do. I'm smart. I can figure out other ways to be able to generate money. My father was like, okay, it's time for you to go get a job. If you want things, pay for it yourself. You're a grown person. So now it's time for you to be grown. So in order for me to get my car, I had to get a job. And I wasn't someone that wanted to work in fast food. I already knew that I'd had all that experience of working at the record label, and I wanted something that kind of aligned with it. And what I found was marketing research. So I started doing marketing research in the mall. And marketing research in the mall allowed me to test out all the theories and all the things that I learned about being able to work with audiences and understand the product at hand, and then put those two together to be able to get the results. So I would know who the brand was, and I would pick people out to say, you know what, you look like you would appreciate their brand. So let me ask you some of the questions without telling you who the brand is, to see if I can get you to answer the questions that qualify you for the survey and allow me to be able to get the information that the brand wants to be able to get and is paying me to be able to gather, so that they can take that marketing message, or rather take that feedback, and create new marketing messaging. One of the things that stands out to me, and one of the things that I always try to repeat back to small business owners, is what you normally hear out in the industry when you hear gurus and everybody else talk about 7 figures and all the rest of that. A lot of times what they're skipping over is all the steps that lead up to you getting to that point. Larger businesses can afford to have the mindset of the process is supply and demand. But as smaller businesses, you have limited budgets and limited mistakes that you can make. So it actually makes more sense to flip it and make it more demand and supply. So demand and supply is listening to what the audience is saying that they need, what challenges they need to be able to have addressed, and creating something to answer that call. Whereas supply and demand is coming up with a business idea and being an innovator, where you're planting the seed of thought in that person's mind, and you're willing to take as long as it needs to for that person to say, you know what, you're right. I do need this. And there are 2 ways to look at it. There's preventative measures, and then there's reactionary. Preventative measures tend to have a longer sales process, because you're actually going through the process of saying, if you don't do this, this will happen. If you don't do this, this will happen. And it's something where people can afford to put that off. So that's what lengthens the sales process. When you're dealing with something that's reactionary, they've already identified it as a challenge. So when it's already something that's a challenge, then you're not taking the time to convince them that they need to address the problem. You're saying, you already know that it's a problem. Here's all the different ways that we can be able to help alleviate that problem, that challenge, that struggle that you're dealing with. As a small business owner, that's why I say it's more demand and supply. If you know that information, then you spend less time paying to learn that information. If you start by listening to what it is that they're saying and addressing those challenges, then you're not taking the time that a larger brand can do, where they do paid advertising for awareness, they do the market research, they gather all this information so that they can learn everything that they need to learn, and then they turn around and present it to the actual audience. As small business owners, we don't necessarily get that luxury. That was valuable for me to work doing the time in the mall, because it gave me the information that brands want to be able to know. It gave me access to the actual audience. And then it was up to me to leverage the things that I learned from the music industry to understand how to be able to present it to them. So I knew what questions they wanted to ask, and they would give them to me in a very specific sequence. But I knew when when I looked at someone, let's say with someone that first came into the mall and they're saying, I'm really busy, I can't talk to you right now, I could skip to the qualifying question so I could see if that was really going to be worth their time or not. If it was someone that said, you know what, catch me later, then we can actually do it, and they genuinely meant it, then maybe I had more time to go through those first series of questions before I got to that qualifying question. If it was someone that I saw in the mall all the different a bunch of times, and each time they said, no, not this time, not this time, not this time, then I took it as a challenge, because, I wanted to figure out how to be able to get that person in, especially if I knew it was something that was going to be valuable to them. So I'll give you an example. There was a woman who used to go in the mall, and similar to me, when I would go to the mall with my friends, again, 6'8", 6'9". So when I went to the mall, this was before they had big man, tall man clothes. So when I went to the mall, maybe I'd get a t-shirt, some shorts, some things that it didn't really matter my size the same way. I wasn't going to get sneakers or things like that, because I had to go to certain places to be able to get them. I noticed this girl would go to the mall with her friends, and her friends were constantly leaving with a bunch of bags. But she always left with only a couple of bags and looking disappointed. So I studied. I watched to see what the situation was. I noticed that there were stores that she would be excited when she walked into, but disappointed when she walked out of. And then I noticed that, basically what was happening is they weren't carrying her size. So when I had clothing brands, and they were asking, what are some of the things that you think that we need to be able to address? I was able to actually learn from watching and observing her to say, you know what, I've been asking you about a survey. Would it help you to know that they're actually asking questions that would help you address the problem that you're having right now? How many times are you going to walk into that store and hope that they're going to have your size when you can actually answer some of these questions and allow me to submit it back to the brand so that the brand knows that if they create a larger size, you'll actually buy it? Now, I went from getting a bunch of no's to getting a yes from that woman because I explained it in a way that showed her how it would be valuable to her to give the brand the information that would allow them to be able to see her. So working in the mall, doing marketing research gave me that experience. And then I transitioned that into doing consultation work. I would do marketing research on over the phone. So where it was hard enough to be able to read people in the mall and live, what I learned how to be able to do was to be able to read people on the phone. And that really helped me refine the elevator pitch and understanding how to be able to get to the quick questions and the things that you need to be able to answer in a quick amount of time of getting someone to answer the phone and saying, do you have time for a survey? So that same, do you have time for a survey? I held that part towards the end and laid into, based on the way that you answer the phone. Sounds like you're having a rough day. Maybe what it is that I'm getting ready to ask you can actually help alleviate it, or at the very least distract you. I'm actually working on a survey. And this survey is directed towards helping people that don't have enough time find more time. Now, selling it that way is going to be definitely different and get you better results than someone that just calls and says, do you have time for a survey? So the thing that got me the job and allowed me to be able to hold that job in the mall now allowed me to be able to excel doing the phone surveys. And I took that experience and then branched out into working for the agencies. And one of the first agencies I worked for when I moved back to New York was Saatchi & Saatchi. And Saatchi & Saatchi gave me a start working in the marketing research department and gathering the information and actually processing. So I got to work on the next stage of the information that I was gathering. So where I was doing the surveys and getting all the questions, once those questions were gathered and answered, then I started processing the results. So it gave me a clear idea as to what they were doing with the information, how it was being presented to the brands, and then looking at what the brands actually did once they got the information, how they changed their marketing strategies and their brand messaging, and then turn around and created campaigns. So conversations that I had 6 months, maybe a year ago, seeing new campaigns roll out on TV or in print, or all the different ways that they may put it out, I got to actually see the results of it. So to see the full process changed my perception again. I got to see the process and the value that each stage brings to the overall thing that you're trying to accomplish. So when I say there's supply and demand versus demand and supply, I'm saying I took the time to learn the process well enough to be able to understand, like in a mall, maybe I need to start with question 3 instead of 1, 2, 3. Maybe I need to go 3, 2, 1. Maybe I need to go 3, 1, 2. Understanding how and when to be able to present the questions so that it makes sense to the person is where you start to pick up on brand messaging. And once I started to understand brand messaging, then I felt like I learned enough to really start to look over to the publishing side, because I understood the brand and I understood the agency of what to do with that information. Once you get it, I'll learn more about the actual audience. So the publishing side is the demand side. The publishing side is the people that actually have the audience. So that's where I got to work with different publishers like New York Press on a smaller level, Men's Fitness. I worked for Condé Nast, where I worked for Vanity Fair, GQ Magazine, Lucky Magazine. I really wanted to be able to understand the audience. And at that time, there wasn't digital, so there was print. So I worked for the magazines. And I understood the importance of separation. If you have two competing companies, if it's a magazine, you need to put at least 7 pages in between those two people, because if you put them any closer, it decreases the value of the actual print that you're running. So not to trash Yelp, but that's one of the reasons why anytime someone calls me from Yelp and they say, oh, well, you would do great on Yelp if you would just advertise with us. My thing is, I just fundamentally have a problem with your framework. The fact that you would want me to pay for an ad, and then you've got competitors down at the bottom of that, it just goes against everything that I was taught and that I know. So looking at things like that, it started to be able to give me red flags. This is why, once again, understanding the process is so important, because if you understand what needs to take place in order to be able to see a sales process or a business idea go from the business idea to a successful business, or a situation where you're starting a sales process, someone enters the top of the funnel, they get introduced to a product or a service, and you have to see it all the way through the customer journey of you realize that it exists to now you made that actual purchase and invested in it. And then there's the whole experience that comes after. What happens after you invest in a business or you invest in a product or service? How do you hold on to that actual customer? Working on the publishing side gave me a better understanding of the audience and the level of things that you have to do in order to be able to not only just win over an audience, but maintain them. So one of the things that I picked up on is when you're a publisher, when you're on the brand side, not the brand side, when you're a publisher and you're dealing with the audience and you're on the demand side, you're dealing with a bunch of different personalities, but you have to be able to create a user experience that accommodates all of those personalities. So there would be brands that would come to a publisher. Let's say, for example, I worked at Everyday Health, and because it was a health industry and it had so many different publications within it, a brand may come and say, well, we would love to be able to advertise with this specific, What would happen is we would take that RFP, we would look and see what it was that they were saying they wanted to be able to accomplish, what it was that they wanted to be able to promote, and then we would build marketing campaigns around it. And sometimes we would build a marketing campaign and build a successful campaign. And sometimes we would get something from an advertiser and say, you know what? Not all money is good money. Because if we take your money and we bring you in and let you advertise what you want to advertise, the way that you want to advertise it, we could potentially lose that audience that we took so much time building up. And that's what made it not all money is good money. So getting that lesson in not all money is good money and understanding what it takes to be able to hold on to an audience just covered another stage of the customer journey and the business process. It gave me the appreciation and the understanding of building brand champions and building customer loyalty, because those subscribers were paid subscribers, paid to be able to get the magazines. Once digital came around, they paid to be able to get the online newsletters and the different things that came along with it. They paid for all the extra information that went onto the websites. If you were talking about health, they wanted to know that you were giving them the best information. If you have the best information and then you turn around and you have some poorly sold drug product playing next to it, that's going to decrease the value of the article telling people about home remedies if you turn around and you put something right next to it that is a poorly made product and it's a drug that if they take it and you look through the side effects, it says that it's addictive. So that's where it's things like that that would make someone say, yes, I can see that this is a good opportunity to make money, but I actually have to think more about the lifetime value of the customer or the audience that I have. So taking that information, I learned the beginning of the process working with the brand. I got to work on the marketing research to see the questions that they were asking. I got to work for the agencies to see what they do once you get those questions answered. And then I got to work with the publishing side to see what happens when they take that brand messaging and they present it to an audience. And then that left the actual exchange. And what I did was working for the exchange. And exchange is where we transitioned from print into digital. So when I worked with Condé Nast and GQ magazine, I can remember a customer saying, or at that point it was a client, I can remember a client saying, you guys are doing great work for us. We love being part of the magazine, the prestige and everything else, but you're getting us a lot of sales. And when you're talking about print back in those days, you could base it based on subscriptions and subscribers, but you are basically putting something to sit in a doctor's office or someplace where someone's going to be idle for a certain amount of time and they have time to flip through a magazine and be able to see an ad. And you're hoping that you're able to present something to them that sticks out long enough for you to create the next opportunity and then the next opportunity and then the next opportunity. And that's really how the customer journey is crafted. If it takes 7 times for someone to be able to see something before they recognize it, feel confident enough about it to be able to invest in it and make a purchase, then that's where those sales and things were coming in. That's where it started to matter. They weren't necessarily posting an ad in a magazine. They're not necessarily posting an ad on a digital website or doing Google ads or Facebook ads to be able to get that person to buy right then. They're posting it to be able to cover one of those touch points, to be able to move them further down the road of that customer journey. If we say know, like, trust, the first time may be getting them to know more about what you do. If it's going back to preventative measures, then you're taking the time to be able to introduce them to something that could be a problem, and then tell them why it's a problem, and then tell them about what happens if they don't address the problem. Like, those are touch points that you have to be able to cover. Those are milestones that you cover. So I was thankful to be able to get the experience to learn the full process and learn the value of being able to understand each one of those stages and each one of those milestones. Because in learning those milestones, it gave me the opportunity to understand things like the difference between supply and demand and supply. The difference between what happens when you get the large business advice and try to apply it to a small business. And this is why so many different things sound good, but when you try to actually implement it, it doesn't land right. So one of the things that I do is I really try to make sure that people understand not just how the process can change everything, but the key insights into how to be able to apply it to their business. And that's why I don't necessarily believe in cookie cutter solutions. The cookie cutter solutions are the one size fits all things that say, if you do this, this is how this is going to work. You'll get this result if you do this. There's no one clear path to a destination. There's always multiple ways to be able to do it. So one of the things that I try to explain to people is I am similar to a GPS that you may have in your car, but I would call myself more of a business GPS. If you've got the business idea and you know what your goal is, then my job is to technically show you how to be able to get to that path, to show you the path on how to be able to get there in a way that suits you. So if you get in a car and you're looking at the navigation, you don't just punch in the address and go. They give you options. Do you want to go a toll-free route? Do you want to go the fastest route? Do you want to go more of the scenic route? All of those different options are the different ways that you can take to be able to get to your definition of success. Not everybody's going to have the same definition. Not everybody's going into business for the same reasons. I like to say that there are basically 3 reasons that people may start a business. 1, they had a great experience that they want other people to enjoy. 1, they had a bad experience that they want to help people avoid. And then another is, I may not have had that firsthand experience, but I do know how to solve the problem. And one of the things that I equate to that is everybody serves as an example in life. Sometimes we're an example of what to do. Sometimes we're an example of what not to do. You don't necessarily have to have firsthand experience on what not to do in order to know not to do it. It goes back to being a kid, and my mother would say, just because someone jumped off the bridge, would you jump off too? You ask why someone's doing something. You do your due diligence, you do your research before you follow behind someone. So it's important to not just take in information, but to figure out how to be able to customize it to your business and make sure that it aligns with the goals and your definition of success. Because if you're someone that is more focused on longevity and running a business so that you can pass it off to someone else, if you're trying to run a business so that you can pay yourself and you want to be able to do it full time, but you're not necessarily looking to be that $1 million business, you just want to be able to have a business that allows you to be able to pay your bills and leaves you enough time to be able to have time with your family and everything else. Whatever your priorities are, those are going to be the things that dictate the path that you're going to be on. So I say that to say, I started with the origin story so that you can have that context and that background of where I'm pulling some of this information from and the different ways that I'm able to apply it, because I made a point of working at every different angle of the actual process so that I understood it enough so that my goal was whenever I walk into a room, if I ever decided I was going to be on the publishing side, I understood the audience and what their role was in the process, so that I knew how to be able to talk to the brand, the agencies, the exchanges. I knew what their job was to make sure that they were doing their job properly. So when we think about the perception versus reality and the music business versus the business of music, we're also talking about the difference between knowing how to run a business and being a business owner. Knowing how to run a business is still a version of being an employee. You know how to make things function. Knowing how to own a business is making sure that everybody eats. So the important part of me learning how to be able to collaborate with other people, I apply that to networking. If I'm a brand strategist, I don't necessarily need to build a website. I just need to know what to tell the person that's building a website so that they can build a website that aligns with the strategy. And then once they're done, then they can hand them back to me, and then I can work with them on their brand marketing. Make sure that whatever it is that they're telling the audience aligns with the strategy that they have, their why for why they started the business, and then make sure that the website continues that story. It aligns with everything that they're saying, because sometimes you'll see people where they have a great business idea, but when you get to where you're actually supposed to make that transaction, or when you start to talk to someone, you realize that it's not everything that you thought it was going to be, or they're not the same type of person. So it was really interesting to me, and one of the reasons why I wanted to branch out from the music industry, where it was selling people, to being able to sell product and services, because I want to see if I could take the best practices of learning how to promote a person and apply it to products and services. I felt like if I can learn how to be able to promote a person and plan an idea and turn someone that someone would walk by in the street and not think anything of, and turn them into someone that they scream about and get excited about, then it should be easier for me to be able to do it with a product or a service, because people talk, people do things. One of the things that I learned on the music industry side was the importance of PR. Public relations was there to be able to fix and put out fires when people went out and did things. They were there to be able to understand how to be able to present someone. A product or a service is what it is. It's something that, as long as you know the basic 3 pillars, which lead to a successful business, which is identify a problem that needs to be addressed, create a solution that you can deliver on, and 3, be consistent with it. Those 3 pillars are the basics that you need to be able to take a business idea and start to wrap a business model around it. Now, success actually comes with adding in a 4th leg to that table, or that tripod, and just 4 legs, whatever way you want to be able to put it. The 4th step in that is making sure that you have a good customer experience. Because when you can meet the expectations and exceed the expectations, that's when you go from that tripod that can be a little wobbly to a table that you can pretty much stand on, because it's giving you enough to be able to say, I told you about a problem and a solution. I delivered on a problem and solution, and you actually had a great experience. More than not, whenever someone is doing a purchase, they're looking for a story. And if you don't give them a narrative or a story that fits with your business, then their narrative and story is going to be what you hear a lot of times. Most people, when you don't give them a great customer experience, the experience that they sell is, I got this for a steal. That's why so many people like sales. When you think about clothing and you think about fashion, because again, work for GQ, Lucky Magazine, spent a lot of time on the fashion side of things, you're really looking at the experience. One of the things that cracks me up is when I hear people that sell online clothing, they want to throw the word luxury in. They say, oh, this is luxury so that they can charge more. But what they don't necessarily realize is luxury is about the experience. Luxury happens before the purchase and after the purchase. Luxury happens before the purchase with the customer experience. If you go into any of these expensive brands, they're asking you if you want bottled water. They've got nice cushioned seats. The aesthetics in there are beautiful. They've got people in there that wait on you hand and foot. I was with a woman for 12 years that loved shopping. And I know it's because when she was having a bad day, she knows she could go out shopping and they would pamper her. They would treat her better than the people in her life would treat her, because they had to. But when she wanted to work out anxiety or any of the rest of that, she would go into a shoe store and know that she's found a pair of shoes that she already wanted, but it didn't mean that she wasn't going to send the person back there 3 or 4 times to try some different sizes, even if she knows she had the right one the first time, even if she knew she had the right dress the first time, because it was about the pampering, it was about the experience. And because she was paying as much as she was paying, she expected that experience. That is part of the actual luxury experience. So when small business owners put luxury items and they don't provide the luxury experience, it's a falsehood. And it's what leads to, you may be able to get that customer, but can you keep that customer? And that's where you hear things like churn. So one of the things that I like to stress is not just thinking through the business idea and building a business model around it, but understanding the audience enough to understand how to be able to create that good user experience and steady that table. So one of the things that I'll be presenting is a framework series. I'll be presenting framework series, and the first series that we're going to be covering, I normally do them in 3 stages. So 3 different milestones to address a challenge or a struggle. And it's pretty much like telling a story, the beginning, the middle, and the end. So the series that I'm going to be working on is business evolution, and we're going to be covering 3 frameworks. We're going to cover first, pause, and timed. First is really taking a look and making sure that your foundation is set so that you have that solid table to stand on. You need that to be able to get up to that next level that you want to get to. And each level comes with its own set of challenges. If it's a house of cards and that main level isn't secure, then everything's going to topple down. And no matter how much progress you've made with your business, you're going to have to go back to the very beginning. When we go back to the saying of 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, if you don't prepare yourself to take those 3 steps, then you're never going to be able to recover from the 2 steps that you get knocked back. If it's 2 steps forward, 2 steps back, you gain no ground. If it's 1 step forward and 3 steps back, you lost ground. So you have to figure out a way to be able to be consistent. When you get to a certain level, maintain that level so that you can continue to grow and scale your business out from there. So first is about putting the foundation in place. It's making sure that you have the information and things that you need to really make sure that the business idea that you have is sound and that is something that you can be profitable with over a certain period of time. And that's where your definition of success comes in. If it's something where, you're the type of entrepreneur that wants to be able to be a serial entrepreneur where you build a business up and you sell it off, then your business model can address that. There are people, there are some brands that it's kind of frowned upon. If we're talking about the Black community, hair care products are something that I think there's an issue with the way that some brands are being promoted. There are not only hair care brands, there's fashion. There's so many different things that are specialty where it's harder to find. And when you sell it like you're going to be around for forever, but you know that you're pretty much just trying to generate enough money so that you can sell the business off, then it's deceiving. It's something where there's, we can go back to using hair care products again. There are things for people with curly hair and products that only work with people, that people with curly hair really need to struggle to be able to find. If you finally find the brand that fits exactly what you need to be able to do, and you go, I know exactly where I can get them, I am adding them into the everyday routine of my life, and then all of a sudden they sell that business off to one of the bigger competitors, and what the really big competitor was trying to do is not necessarily take that product and continue to grow it. They wanted to snuff it out. So all of a sudden you go from being able to see it in the stores where you were always able to get it to it becoming harder and harder to find. And then sometimes it requires you going to the website and a very niche place to be able to find it. And if you notice, normally when you go to those places, they're asking for information because they want to find out more about you so that they can figure out how to plant the seed to point you to the direction of the things that already existed that they were selling that smaller business disrupted. So when we think about different types of entrepreneurs and different paths, there are 3 basic types of entrepreneurs. There's the assimilator, which basically enters into a market that already exists and just finds a way to carve out a piece for themselves. There's the innovator that creates something that never existed before. And then there's the disruptors, where you basically come in and say there's a better way to be able to do something. What I described with the hair care product are disruptors. There are smaller brands that came out and came up with great products, and then there were the larger company, let's say a Procter & Gamble, so many different ones that could be named there. And not necessarily hair care, it could be anything. But when they're large enough and they know that you're disrupting everything that they put in place, and they already have a framework, they already have their structure, they already have so many different things to do. If you're successful, they're going to have to invest in changing everything that they already have in place, learn this whole process all over again, just to be able to compete with you. It's just easier to buy you out and snuff you out. So these are things to be able to keep in mind. So when you have first, it allows you to be able to have the foundation and think through how you want to promote yourself and how you want to promote the business based on what your goals are. And then that brings us to pause. And pause is really just taking a look at, is this the right time to be able to put out this specific product? Or am I bringing the right use case to market? And I'll give you an example. Sometimes you may have a product or a service that is a great idea, but you need to check the longevity of it. What can you bring to market that's going to allow you to be able to see results today as opposed to 6 months from now, a year from now? If you try to bring something to market that's going to take you longer to be able to get interest and sales on, then that's more of the supply and demand. That means that you have the budget to be able to cover those 7 to 10 touch points, making sure that people see you that many times before they're comfortable being able to ask, what is this about? There was a brand, ING, and for a while they would just put their name out on benches and bus stops and all these different places. And they planted the seed for every time you saw it. They didn't explain what it was. They just put it out there. And eventually, when they started running the commercials, people were like, oh, is that what that was? They didn't take time to figure out, well, what is this and all the rest of it. It's because they already laid the groundwork for it. By the time they started running the commercials, they had already moved them past the know and the like part of it to the point of, okay, well, now I feel like I know who you are. I've seen it so much that I did like that you put that stuff out there. It was clever the way that you did that. Good marketing strategies can be leveraged where sometimes it's not how good the product is. Sometimes it's about how good you sell it and the storytelling behind this. Their marketing strategy was they put that ad out long before they started it. And by the time they rolled it out, people were more interested in what they do. So they didn't have to explain the name. They were able to bypass a bunch of different things. Pause is taking a look at making sure that you're bringing the right thing to market. Because again, let me give you an even better example. If you have something that has multiple use cases and you know that the way that you intended it to be used is something that could take longer for people to catch on to, but when you did your research, when you started using the first principle and you started to find out more about the different ways people can use your product or service, if you know there's one that people are willing to buy now, then you want to roll that one out now. You don't want to go with your passion project and be strict about the way that it can be used if it's a way that can be used that allows you to be able to generate revenue now. Because one of the things that I explain to my clients and just small business owners in general is the goal as a small business owner is to pay out of your profits instead of out of your pocket. If you have to pay out of your savings, then you're dealing with something that's a longer sales process and you run more of a risk of not being able to see that through. But if you have something where you're already generating revenue, then it puts you in a position to follow what the larger businesses do, but on a smaller scale. You don't have to throw a whole bunch of money behind it, but you can put some of your profits behind it. And that's where you start to see small business owners cover the 33-33-34 principle. And that's basically saying when you generate revenue, let's say you sell something for $100, 33% of it goes to operating costs, 33% goes into the actual business, or you may sit aside for sales tax and things like that. And then maybe that 34% you pay yourself. So a lot of times what happens is the mistake that small business owners make is they think if they sold something for $100, they made $100. No, what you did was you created an opportunity for you to be able to make that money again. You have to put some money back into making sure that those people know how to find you. You have to put some money into making sure that you can continue to deliver those results. And if you're fortunate enough, you'll have some money left over to be able to pay yourself. When you first start out, the milestones that you're looking for are being able to get to the point where you're breaking even. Anything that you invest, you're at least making that money back. And then you can start to add in the next milestone of, I want to be able to make this much in profit. When you hear a lot of people say, I 10X the business, and this is one of the reasons why I struggle when it comes to gurus and cookie cutter solutions where I can 10X your business. There are so many factors that go into a business and use cases and knowing how to be able to work it. That's why I think pause is important because, again, if someone is willing to pay you for something to use it one way, if you have enough people are willing to do that, let them do that. Take that money and then invest in showing people how to do it the way that you want them to be able to do it. And as long as it's damaging your reputation or doing something that's irreparable damage that you can't undo, changing the narrative and perception of your brand, as long as it still aligns with your basic value proposition, it's something to go with. So pause is really just about making sure that whatever you bring to market is the right thing to be able to address the immediate needs as opposed to the long-term needs and looking too far down the road. Timed is really just a matter of checking the timing of it. We talked about ING and the way that they time their promotion. I'll give you another example. Rollerblades, when they first came out, we're going back years now. Rollerblades handed out the rollerblades to a bunch of people. I'll give you an example in New York. They gave it out to a bunch of people that they knew were either joggers that would go around the reservoir. They were roller skating around the reservoir, getting their exercise in. They gave them to some of those people, but they gave them to the cool ones. And they knew that if they gave it to some people will say, oh my God, that's so cool. Where'd you get that? And they were like, oh, it's not out yet. but they said it's going to be out in a couple of months. It was the ING version. They did their promotion before they launched. So getting the timing right. Sometimes what you want to be able to do is you want to set your marketing so that by the time you launch, you can hit the ground running. And it's just going through the steps and the checkpoints to make sure that you have what you need to have in place to be able to have those successful launches. Because what we're really trying to do when we're thinking about launching as a small business is, especially as just entrepreneurship in general, when you step out as an entrepreneur, a lot of things there's perception versus reality. The same way that I talked about the music business and the business of music, entrepreneurship, a lot of people say, oh, well, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I don't want to work for anybody else. I'm going to go out on my own. There are the people in your lives that may think that because you're an entrepreneur, you're going to have more time to hang out rather than less time. I know when I started my business, there were a bunch of people that said, oh, well, now that you're not going to be working those long hours you used to work on the corporate side, you're going to have more time to be able to spend, hanging out and doing more things. The reality was I had less time to be able to do some of those things because now I wasn't an employee where I knew I was still going to get that check. I was in a position where I was running the business and owning the business. So when you hear owned and operated, it's not just that they're owning the business and making sure that the lights stay on. They're running the business to make sure that the business has enough revenue coming in so that they can keep the lights on. So it was a different experience. And when you're thinking about first pause in time, what we're doing is we're not only thinking about the business side of it, we're addressing the circumstances that are around it. Because when you start your business, you're running into asking a lot of all the people around you. When most people start a business, they may say, you know what, I need to get some sales. Would you buy this from me? They'll have people test things out. So that's their test audience. And so many different things where if it's not taking time or asking for money, it's a lot of different expectations that you're asking people to let go of while you figure out how to be able to grow out the business. First pause in time are putting you in a position so that by the time you launch, not only do you feel confident about the product that you bring out and your ability to be able to scale it up to meet your definition of success, but it's that, and it's a reward to the people around you that validate all the things that I asked of you, all the sacrifices, all the different things that I inconvenience you so that I could be selfish enough to be able to get this off the ground. It validates to them that it was worth it. So it takes it from being something that was just about you to turning it into something that they can actually appreciate because they see the results of it. So much of entrepreneurship is having something in your head and then trying to figure out how to convey it to the rest of the world. When you can have the proper foundation in place, it allows you to be able to build something structurally that allows people to start to be able to see it. And then as they start to see it, they start to believe in it more. And then you go from needing to ask people to be able to tell other people about your business to having something where they're proud to be able to talk about it. So it's different ways to be able to help your business grow and evolve and not have to necessarily spend the budget to be able to do it. So when we think about first, pause, and time, these are going to be stages and different frameworks. Like I said, I will be presenting those individually because I want to dig into each one and give you more details to make sure that you can get what you need from it. But again, this episode was really about making sure that I gave you the origin story, gave you some context as to some of the things that I'll be promoting and walking you through, and then explaining why. It's being able to highlight things where I say, I'm like your business GPS. If you get into the car and you put in a destination, it's like coming to me and saying, well, I have this business idea and this is what my goal is. How do I get there? And I'm like, okay, well, here's the different paths that you could take to be able to get there. What are your circumstances and situation? There are some people that have a lot of friends. I would say don't necessarily use your friends and friends of friends to buy from you, but hire them almost as employees. Get them to talk about your brand to their friends of friends and all these other people so they widen the scope of the level of people that know about your product and service. That bypasses you from being the type of person that when you start a business, your friends and family are the ones that are supporting you for the first couple of years because you need that revenue to be able to keep the doors open and not burn through your budget. The smarter and more efficient approach is being able to leverage them as brand champions. So a lot of times what I'll tell people that have small businesses and they're doing like their online clothing store, instead of asking your friends to buy your product, give it to them for free. Give out 5 to 10 things. You know how much it's going to cost for you to be able to give that to them for free. You're most likely marking it up to be able to cover the cost and make sure that you turn a profit on it anyway. You know how much you can afford to be able to give away and still be able to break even. because again, one of the first milestones is to make sure that you can break even. By having those products out there, you have people wearing it. Oh, that's nice. Where'd you get that from? Oh, well, I have a friend that sells, sells these hoodies, sells this, sells that. And then they're telling people about it. When other people see it, it's like the ING bus stop ad and the benches. It's making sure that people know it when they see it. So when they see it enough places, they start to say, where are people getting this from? Where are they finding it? How can I find it? Like I saw that person wearing that, they looked awful in it. But I think if I put it on, I could pull it off. It triggers so many different responses. And if done well, by the time you work through those touch points and they go to have an actual conversation or visit your website or anything like that, it puts them in a position where they're closer to being able to make that purchase, make that investment. And it cuts down on the level of touch points that you have to be there for and allows you to have your name in rooms that you're not necessarily in. So it's important to not only understand the process, but understand how to be able to customize the process to your situation. Now, that's an example of people that have a bunch of friends. What about the introverts? What about the people that don't have a bunch of friends that they can rely on? How do they scale up their business? To them, I would say, focus on your solution, focus on the results. If you're not someone that wants to be in front of the camera, I don't necessarily like doing video, but I know that it's a necessary evil. So it's something that you have to be able to do and be able to work your way up to. Now, I can say that about myself because I can get over that, but I'm still an introvert. So there's certain things where I'm not going to be out there all the time, but there are aspects that I know are just part of the responsibility of owning and running a business. But if you're an introvert and you don't want to be in front of the camera, I've spoke to a small business owner and her thing is, I can't. I just can't. And my thing is, okay, well, that's okay. You can do videos, you can do posts and things and narrate, which allows you to be part of it without being completely in it. They'll know your voice, but they don't necessarily have to see your face. For introverts, one of the things that I say again is focus on the results. If you can deliver great results and get those initial clients can be the people that sing your praises. You get testimonials, customer success stories, case studies where you describe where they were when you first met them, the process of getting them from the challenge and struggle that they were dealing with to being able to address it to now this is part of their everyday life and they can't see themselves without it. That tells a story that takes it away from you talking about your business to them talking about your business. And if we're being honest, everyone's going to talk good about their business, but the people that we're most likely going to listen to are the people that have been through the experience that paid to be in that experience. So I would tell an introvert, focus more on being able to get your testimonials and things in place so that they can sing your praises, and what you're promoting is their case studies, their customer success stories, their testimonials. So it's why I say there's no one path to a solution. There are so many different paths. What I'm looking at is what are your surrounding circumstances? I had another friend who said he put together a savings and he wanted to start his own business, but he was worried about the risk. And he didn't really have time to be able to be there for every part of the business. So my conversation with him was about learning enough about the business to be able to hire smart and hire wisely so that the people that you bring in can manage all the tasks and things for you, but you know enough about it to know who is doing what they're supposed to be doing when they're supposed to be doing it. So different circumstances, different paths. And it's important to be able to understand the path that best aligns with what you need to be able to get done. So definitely want to make sure that you understand the process, understand a better idea of my origin story, where I'm pulling some of this information from, and then give you an idea of how I apply it and the different ways that I can apply it to different situations. I love to be able to gather that feedback, listen to what people are struggling in and challenging, what kind of things that they're trying to address, what their surrounding circumstances are, because all of those things are factors. And when you can pull all of those factors together and you understand the process well enough, then I can pick the points where you bring the most value and where you can leverage it to really be able to say, okay, right now, focus on this part. If you can land this part, then you can find the collaborators that can fill in all the parts that are weaker points where you're not as strong yet. And while you're building up your strength, while you're building up that muscle, you have those people take care of that part. And the upside to that is, again, I can give you the example as a brand strategist. I work with web designers and agencies. When I give someone the brand strategy and I help them with their business idea and their business model, they take that brand brief and they bring it to a graphic designer, a brand designer. So they get their logos, they get their marketing materials. They take that deliverable and that brand brief and they give it to a web designer or a web developer, and that person builds out the website. If I'm not doing their paid ads or I'm not helping them with their marketing, they have something to be able to hand to the marketer, or they can do it themselves and say, here's the strategy that I want to be able to implement. This is going to get me to these milestones. Once I cover these milestones, then I'll rethink what my plan is going to be. So I think it's important to not only understand the process, but to identify where you fit in it, how to be able to leverage your special gifts within it and monetize that in a way that makes sense. So in the next episode, we're going to talk about the first method, and that's going to be focus, investigate, research, create structure, and then test it. And that's really going to allow you to be able to put together the foundation that you need. So again, F is for focus, I is for identify, R is for research, S is for structure, and T is for test. If you found this interesting, helpful in any kind of way, please like, share, and subscribe. Definitely want to make sure that it's understood that this is not only something where I'll be sharing this information, but I will also be bringing guests in to be able to cover their stories, their struggles, the different things and experiences that they've had, because that's where you fill in the blanks of not knowing the things that you need to know and also knowing the things that you should probably avoid. So I thank you for your time, and I will catch you on the next episode. Thank you for tuning in to the Strategic Thinkers Podcast. Remember, when you can make the inconvenient convenient, people are willing to pay you for the experience. The better the experience, the more they'll not only pay you, but help others pay you. Serving as brand champions. My name is Sean Atkinson, and I'm wishing you well on your journey to your definition of success. If you find this podcast interesting, helpful, worth a listen, like, share, and subscribe. Leave a positive review so people know to check it out, and I'll see you next time.